Welcome, everyone. So today, we are going to have a chat about editing. It's going to be like a little editing crash course to give you some foundational information, some beneficial tips, different types of editing, how you might want to go about certain things. Therefore, Rachel's going to lead us because I am a little bit more of the mindset and intuitive strategy and, creative finding kind of end of things, and Rachel is the queen of editing. So, without further ado, take it away, my friend.
Thank you. And I will say that the work we do together is so complementary because someone needs to get to that finished product before they get to me for the editing part. And then as we'll kind of chat about today, even though you've hit the editing part, the creative part of it isn't over yet. So you still need to tap into that side. And so having those writing partners or writing coach, things like that are so crucial through many parts of the editing journey. So I'm going to kind of give us first a breakdown of the different types of editing because there are so many types of editing out there. And I'll find a lot of times people come thinking they need something different, or they'll think a type of editing means something other than what it means. So there's lots of confusion. And the other point of this as well is to help you as an author be informed about when you want to do each style of editing, because that's going to save you time and save you money and frustration.
Because if you're like me and you're like, oh, I'm going to do all the editing at the same time, you get through a chapter and you're like, oh my God, I'm wiped. That was so intense. And then you go into these spirals of just like, oh my God, was this even good? And then you have to go and change a bunch of crap anyways because you didn't do the developmental part before you did the line editing. And you're like, oh, I just wasted all that time. And so having a little structure in your editing is good.
Yes, yes. So I'll take you through what would be the ideal process of going through editing. So there's two main phases to editing. The first phase is kind of what we think of as like structural editing. You may hear it referred to as substantive editing as well. And that includes two kind of core components. The first one is manuscript evaluation, which could also be called an editorial assessment or a manuscript critique. So now we already see how things
There's
get
a
so
lot of
confusing
words.
because there's so many names for just that one thing, right? Why isn't this easy to know?
Yeah.
So this is kind of where I suggest anybody starts if you've just kind of finished your book, is to start at this spot before you dive in to a full developmental edit, which would be the next step. So the manuscript evaluation, manuscript critique, editorial assessment. This is basically, I like to think of it as a hybrid between a beta reader and a developmental edit, because you're getting someone who is a trained editor and they are looking at the big picture view of your book and giving you feedback at a deeper level than someone who's just a beta reader. So with this type of assessment, we're looking at like the whole big picture of the book. So we're going to take a look at the structure of the book, pacing, character development, tension, all of these aspects that make it a compelling, exciting book to read. We're not getting into the nitty-gritty here yet of spelling and grammar and line by line. This is the big architecture, the house of your book, right? We have to make sure it has a solid foundation and that it has, all the rooms set up for your story to exist within it. And when you get an edit like this, you're not going to be getting edits on the page. This is more, you're going to get what we call like an editorial letter, and your editor will break things down for you. And each editor approaches these slightly differently. So make sure you take a look at their website, see how they do it, ask questions if you want to. Like, we'll be looking, like for me, I would give you a chapter by chapter breakdown of what's going on in the story. But then I also will provide additional information of story structure, kind of with some visuals and graphics. So I use a software that helps me called Fictionary, and that helps me with making a visual aspect, because I think sometimes it helps, besides just seeing words, to actually see like a little graph or a chart of certain parts. And so I like to kind of include that. And I also like to do it as like a little bit of a video walkthrough. So I'll give you a written letter, but I'll also give you a little bit of video because I think it just is more fun than just staring at a page, and we all absorb information differently. But not every editor does that. Most of the times you'll just get some kind of a letter. But when we
So
go through,
with that
yeah.
level, I've got a question. With that level, okay, so is that something that an author could kind of like go through themselves? Like, is this like, okay, now that or is it more of like, I've gone through my phases of editing as best I can. I've edited the crap out of this as best I can. And so now I'm sending it over to you. And this is like the first review of things? Or is that or could the
Yes.
author themselves be like, okay, so this is my first phase of editing?
Yes, excellent, excellent point. So yes, this should be a writer. This should be your own personal first phase of editing where you are going through and doing exactly what you said, Nino. You are reading that entire story. So like we've chatted about this before that like when you finish a book, you don't automatically hand that over to an editor, right? You need to go through and check it out yourself. So read through that entire manuscript from start to finish. You can jot some notes down. I don't want you taking the time right now to actually go in and make those edits because you're going to see things further down the book that may mean you have to change things earlier in the
Mhm.
book or things like that. So do that first read through on your own. Just take some notes down, then go through and make whatever adjustments you can on your own. And then once you've hit that point where you're like, I've done everything that I personally can right now. And maybe I need extra eyes on it, or like I think I'm feeling pretty good about it, then that's when I would say go and get that manuscript evaluation done and do that as that stepping stone to a full developmental edit. Because this is going to, again, it's going to save you time and money because you may have thought like, that you had everything sorted, but it's hard. And this kind of ties into, right, of why writers need editors is
Mhm.
we are so close to our own stories that sometimes we don't see things that are missing because we have it all up here,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
I have the entire mythology in my brain, so if I make a reference to the mythology, of course the reader should know what I'm talking about. And it's like nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Yes. Nobody.
So with this information, right? So if I have just finished writing a book, would you say that I need to go through all of I need to go through at least the evaluation myself and the developmental edits myself and then the line edits myself before I go to you? Or is it
Mm.
more of like case by case? Or is it more of like, okay, I've reviewed my stuff and I need someone else's opinion to know how to move forward, and then I go to a manuscript evaluation with you? How would that work?
Yes. So I think it's really important to think about is how much editing, right, that you're going to do before you go on. I would always suggest that you stick with the big picture editing first before you start getting into the nitty gritty of like a line editing. I would say like when you're reading through, the only time I would say really to like kind of tweak maybe individual lines when you're going back through for that pass for yourself is if something is just like the grammar of the sentence trips your brain up and it like really jars you out because then whoever's helping to read your book is also going to kind of have this weird moment. But I don't want you worrying about making every line gorgeous and beautiful at this stage in the process because you are going to end up deleting a lot of stuff, changing
Mhm.
stuff, adding stuff. So if you're going through and trying to, edit line by line to make this beautiful piece before an editor sees it, there's so much time that you've invested in work that you might not even be keeping. So I would say kind of avoid that.
So then maybe as like, okay, I've drafted my book, and now I read through it and then I do my developmental edits of it.
Mhm.
And
Yep,
then I send it to you for a manuscript evaluation, see if anything pops up and see if it's ready for a developmental edit. And then after that
exactly.
happens, then we go into line editing phase.
Then we'll go to phase
Okay.
2, exactly, yeah, so the manuscript evaluation is kind of like the beginning part. You don't have to do that. If you wanna just dump in and dive into a developmental edit, you certainly can. A developmental edit is gonna be more expensive, but if you maybe can't afford to do both of them, then kind of look at your budget and like, "Alright, maybe a developmental edit is too expensive, I can't afford that, but I can afford a manuscript evaluation." At least do the manuscript evaluation because you are going to get so much value from that. you're going to have to put in extra legwork because you're going to then have to make all of those additional changes and you won't have that line like on the page feedback. So like when you get a developmental edit, you're getting much more feedback. So when you get a manuscript evaluation, editors are going to give you actionable advice on things to do and they'll kind of let you know, like, hey, the pacing was really sagging here. You could think about XYZ, or, maybe this later scene kind of would fit a little bit better here. So you're going to get some of that actionable advice on the page, but it's not to the level you'll get with a developmental edit, where with the developmental edit, like, I'm going through scene by scene within your book, page by page, chapter by chapter, like every single part. And you were getting feedback like right on the page. So it might, have a thing here that's like, okay, this character's motivation here really doesn't match like what happened at the end of the chapter. So, what are your thoughts about blah, blah, blah? Like you're going to get very tailored feedback on every single page about what is working, what might not be working, where you might need to add stuff. And then you're going to be getting a detailed um, editorial letter back as well on top of all of the actual practical suggestions that are within there. So it's definitely takes it to a whole new level and it gives you a lot more to work with and more specific what to work with as you're going through that. So it's kind of like, right, you got to play around and see where it fits within your budget, what you can do. In an ideal world, I would have you go through both because then you've made the changes from that manuscript evaluation. So when you give me that book or an editor a book for the developmental edit, the book is already that much stronger. So you're able to like make it even better, better, better than like you could have if you kind of skipped some of the steps and things like that. So that's kind of where we are with looking at the big picture within those. So again, like the development audit manuscript evaluation is looking at the big picture components. We're looking at character development, pacing, story structure, tension, dialogue. We're looking at all of those bits and bobs. We just haven't gotten down to the nitty gritty, which is what we'll do in phase 2. So before we move to that, has that kind of helped answer your questions? Any lingering questions for those?
Yeah, I think it's just, being able to identify, where you are in your phase of things, right? So, like, I have
Mm-hmm.
drafted my entire book and I am currently going through developmental edits myself before I send it off to you to do your magic with it for the developmental
Yes.
phase. And just FYI, if you have not reached your developmental editing stage yet, it is so hard not to line edit.
Oh, yes.
Legit, it is so hard. I did an entire chapter yesterday and I'm like, "Oh, shit, I line edited this whole thing." I'm like, "That's, just because it's your brain doing 2 different things, right?"
Yes.
And we sometimes think that that is, to multitask like that is the more time effective,
Yes.
is that the word? Thing to do, but it's not in the long run in the grand scheme of things. And I constantly have to bring my brain back to we're developmental editing this now.
Yes. And I think like in my brain there, I also left out some of the other things that we'll look at. So I already talked about, we're looking at the big picture structure, character development. But some other things we also look at in this phase 1 is like clarity and cohesion. So making sure, like I was saying, your character was working on this, but then all of a sudden, like that just disappeared, and now they're working on that. So there's a little bit of confusion. We're looking at how effective scenes are. So are the scenes driving your story forward, or maybe they don't need to be there, or are we missing a scene? Because like it was talked about before, it up here, but maybe didn't
Mhm.
show it on the page. Or maybe something you showed on the page is really interesting to you as an author because you've done so much research. But as a reader, they're like, okay, let's get the story going. And we're also looking at like your POV. So like, is your POV consistent? Is it the right one for your story? Do you have head hopping? We're looking at the world building, your theme and your emotional arc, and also looking at the genre tropes and conventions and seeing for the type of book you're writing, have you stayed within those? Is maybe something lacking. So I want to make sure that your readers are happy with what they
Yeah,
got.
and
So
if you're
that is
breaking
everything.
rules, if you're breaking
Yes.
rules, if you're breaking tropes, are you doing it right? Are you doing it well? That will make it worth it for your readers to experience, or is it gonna just make them mad? Like,
Yes.
because
Yes.
I'm a big fan of breaking trends,
Yeah.
breaking away from the what you always see. I'm writing about a gender fluid demigod and having multiple relations with multiple genders. So I don't like to stick within boxes. But with that, you have to make sure you're doing it in a way that is well crafted and well
Yeah.
delivered if you're going to break free from the norm.
Exactly, and there's certain genre conventions you don't wanna break, and then there's certain ones you
Mhm.
can break, so an editor is gonna be able to help you kind of sort through those types of things. So to kinda wrap it all up for that phase 1, before you're sending that to the editor, you wanna look through it yourself. You wanna make sure, do you have a cohesive story? Is there an arc that your character has gone through from start to finish? Do you have a theme that's central to your book as well, right? Because that's going to help drive your story. And making sure that you are giving them a draft you've gone back through on your own, fixed some things that you could fix, and that is doesn't have to be polished grammar, polished lines, but that if there are lines that stick out that are kind of like, woo, like, and you can fix it yourself. If you can't fix it, leave a comment on there and be like, hey, I know this is funky. Like, I just don't quite know yet. Like, you don't have to know all the things. And as you're reading through as well, that list that you're keeping for yourself, whatever things that you didn't address or things maybe you did address, send that to your editor and say, when I read through, I realized that this minor character is actually a major character and I've added them in a few spots, but I'm really not sure if I did it enough. And, then your editor knows certain things that have already stood out to you that they can look at as they're going through it to give you that additional feedback on those things that you saw. So I think that's kind of like a fun way to have it be a collaborative process because that's exactly what it is. An editor is not there at any stage to take your voice out of the story or to take over your story. We're there to help you maintain your voice, develop your author voice, and create the best story you possibly can to delight your readers.
I really like the tip about making little comments. I've been doing that in my book because I'll
Mhm.
have these moments where I'm like, is this redundant? And I'm like, I know that this is a line edit thing, so let me just highlight this so
Yep.
future Nino can go and look and like really think deeply about that, in retrospect to or in contemplation of the entire thing. And so I'll put like those little things like, is this redundant? Or make this so much prettier, like, or go through those little pieces when things really, really stand out and bother me, but not enough to be jarring, not enough to be like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a problem. It's just irksome, or I just can't decide in that moment where it's just like,
Mhm.
is this something that's valuable to have, or is this going to be giving away too much? Is this just a redundant information or whatever? So I found that has been very helpful of keeping me on track with
Yes.
developmental editing as well.
Awesome. Yes, it keeps you moving forward versus getting hung up because you're going to do many, many rounds of your editing. It's not just a one and done. Like, even when
Yeah.
you get done with the developmental editor, you're still going to go back and you're going to reread that story again before you move on to phase 2 to see if there's anything else big picture wise that you need to change.
Yeah, the
So
amount of times that we read our books is insane. Is
yeah.
insane. And, coming from a nonfiction space, I just don't think that that is as common in nonfiction to have to read through it so many times because there's so much in fiction, there's so much nuance.
Yeah.
And so a character can literally say one thing and it makes something different mean something totally you know what I mean? Like that one line
Yes.
can completely foreshadow an entire thing and spoil a whole thing happening, right? And you just don't always like it's so much more nuanced.
Yes, and I will say with the nuance, even if you are a nonfiction writer, don't skip phase 1.
For
Don't
sure.
skip phase 1, please don't. Because
For
even
sure.
within, like, a self-help book, like, a memoir has
Yeah.
more of that narrative, right? Like, it is
Yeah.
writing kind of like fiction in a sense. But even in like a self-help book, a developmental editor is going to help you, because like we talked about more fiction-y stuff, but a developmental
Hmm.
editor for nonfiction is going to help you look at the structure of your book as well. Because even a nonfiction, self-help, personal development, whatever it is, business book, you still have an arc, you still have a journey for the reader
Hmm.
from start to finish. You
It's
need
just
to
a little
things to
bit
be
more like
logically spread
clear
out.
cut. Yeah, it's
Yes.
just a little bit more like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and it's like a little bit more clear cut and linear. I think with memoir, there's so much more of a storytelling component. So like a lot of the
Mhm.
things we talk about on the podcast in relation to fiction very much apply
Yeah.
to memoir. Because I know that I'm listening to a memoir right now, and I'm like, this really feels like it could have used some developmental editing because it's very jumpy. And I'm like, wait, what happened in this one? Wait, was that before or after this thing happened? And it gets a little confusing when you're thinking about the overall timeline of a person's life. So yeah, but I think with something like a self-help or a business book, the developmental phase is a bit more of like, does this chapter belong before the next step or after the next step kind of thing, and less of, if I say this one thing right here, will this completely change the entire plot of the entire rest of the book, you know?
Yes. Yeah, and you wanna make sure as well, I think in nonfiction, like, you're an expert in your field, and so there might be stuff that you've left out. You might be explaining things maybe at a level that your audience isn't gonna resonate with. So there's so many different things within there that an editor can help you with in the developmental stage, whether you're doing fiction or nonfiction. So all of these phase 1 and phase 2 is no matter what you're writing, go through these. So once we've finished up with the big picture, the structure, like you have an awesome book, the content's beautiful, now it's time to address the sentence level stuff. So within here, there are 3 phases of editing that we'll go through. And I feel like this is where the most confusion comes in when people are like, I need to get my book edited. A lot of people think, I want to get my book edited. It's spelling, grammar. I want help with that. And that is part of it. But there are different types of that. And so you want to be careful that you're getting the type of edit that you think you are getting. So the like kind of higher tier, like we're going to kind of go like we've done big picture. Now we're working kind of down, down, down to like smaller, more nuanced components. So now we're on line editing. Now, line editing is not addressing your spelling and grammar. Line editing is looking at your prose. So, how do the lines sound? Is there continuity within here? Do you have one character and they always sound like this, and then all of a sudden on this page, I can't tell that character's dialogue apart from another character's dialogue? They're looking at all different types of things. So, like, for example, and this also shows that no book is ever error free. I'm going to give you an example from an author I love. I'm not going to say who the author is, but they're very, very prolific, well known romance author. I adore them. They have a series that has, I don't even know, it's got to be 15 or 20 books in it. And I was rereading from the beginning. I was like, I want to go reread and like rediscover this author. And this book was traditionally published, so it's been through many rounds of edits. I was in a chapter, and all of a sudden, one of the dialogue tags was this other character. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought they were in another state. Like, they're traveling there now, but they're not here. And so there was this line error thing within this whole chapter that they kept inserting this person in the dialogue tag of being in there in the conversation, but they weren't speaking, they were talking about the person, but it was written incorrectly. And it like threw me out of the story. And I was like, what is happening? And then something similar like that happened a few chapters down the road where a character that wasn't even in that chapter, it made them talking. So line editing is going to help you with types of things like that, but it's also going to help you with maybe those sentences that felt clunky. Maybe you wanted some more help with doing like showing versus telling. Maybe you're not as strong with doing a description and you're like, I don't feel like this is immersive enough. That line editing is going to help you to polish that prose, make it beautiful. But again, we're not here necessarily getting into the nitty gritty spelling and grammar because you need to go back through, review what the author has suggested, and decide if you like it. If you don't like it, put your own spin on it. And again, here, the editor is helping you to write in your voice. They're not interjecting their own writing style. They're going to help you keep it cohesive. Kind of makes me think like a ghostwriter. They're not writing your book as a ghostwriter, but in that sense that they are helping you within your voice in the manuscript.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think a lot of times people who, especially who lean more towards the artist, right? They don't want their art changed outside of what their intention is. And so having a good editor that's going to help you to just be more you, more your art, help you fully
Mhm.
embody that in a way that's going to allow it to resonate with your reader the way you want it to, the way you're intending it to, is, where magic happens. And that's one of the important facets of finding the right editor for you. Just because someone's an editor does not mean they're going to understand your work. It doesn't mean they're going to help you uh, right? Like if, for example, there's an editor who is way more straightforward, they like cut and dry, simple sentences, like that is their personal favorite, and then I come in with a highly lyrical book with a lot of metaphors in things or things like that. They might just not be even able to fully edit it
Mhm.
in a way that feels like it's still my work because they're like, "Oh, this is too flowery. This is too this is too," right? Which is not my art, right? My art is lyrical. So that person's not going to be right for me. And that's, one of the things with the manuscript evaluations that could be helpful in finding your editor
Mhm.
because you can see if their feedback is resonant with you. Because, like we've talked about before, sometimes like you go to an editor and they're just not a personality match and it can be extremely discouraging. So, just keeping that in mind.
Yes, I don't want anyone to be discouraged by the edits. And for those heavier edits, like a developmental edit or a line edit, a lot of editors will do what we call a sample edit for you. And it's usually like a very short thing, like maybe 1,000 words or something like that. And it lets us see kind of the state of your manuscript, which helps us to give you an accurate price of how much the edit will cost and how long the edit will take to do. But it also gives you a chance as the writer to see the type of feedback we give and how you resonate with that. And I think it also is very helpful. Like on my intake form, I always ask, like, what kind of feedback is helpful for you? Like, are you the type of person who you're like, okay, just tell it to me and like I'm cool and I'll do it? Or are you the person who like, I really need to see an example of this? Like it's not helpful for you to just tell me something. I need to know why and I need to see it. Because as editors, we will provide you resources, we'll give you examples, things like that. So it's helpful for us to know what type of feedback you resonate with and how you learn. Because if I just send you recommendations for books and you're like, I don't learn by reading a book, like give me a video or just give me like a before and after example of a sentence, then boom, I know what type of feedback to give you. So that's what's really important about that sample edit. And the sample edit is normally free. It's very short, but I think it's a great thing to do. You're not necessarily going to have that sample edit for the next two stages of editing that are in phase two, because these are more cut and dry. So after we make your lines beautiful, then we're attacking the grammar goblins, and that's in copy editing. So that we're going to check the commas, we're going to check the dialogue tags, we're going to check, all right, is the period inside the quotation marks? Like all of that structural stuff, that is where it's going to be attacked, is within the copy edit. Each of these types of editing as well, I will say, are specialized. So someone who does a copy edit isn't necessarily someone who's going to be someone who's doing a developmental edit for you. Like they're completely different skill sets. Some editors are a jack of all trades and they do multiple forms. But I would say and other editors, I think, will agree with me. You don't necessarily want to use the same editor to take you through the entire process because you already now are blinded to it and you know what it's supposed to say. And so when you read over it, you may miss different things that should be fixed. So, like for myself, I do primarily the developmental editing, that phase one stuff, but I also enjoy doing those line edits as well. So, I sometimes will incorporate a little bit of line edits into my developmental editing, just to kind of also use it as a teaching tool for my writers to kind of help them improve stuff. So, your copy edit, like I said, that's going to be nitty gritty. This is people who freaking are obsessed with grammar are going to be here. Yes,
Yeah.
that is their like it just delights them to no end. They're the people who go and be like, "All right, wow, like that ad that I just saw at the grocery store, which is a true story for me, like had an error in it and they used the wrong word." And I was like, "Wow, how many marketing dollars did they waste because they put the wrong word on these shopping bags and did nobody notice this?" Yeah, yeah. Like if that stuff stands out to you, like you may enjoy copy editing. So yeah,
Now,
it was crazy.
is copy editing the same as proofreading, or is
Mhm.
that different? Because that's something that I
Yes.
think a lot of people get confused is copy editing versus proofreading. And
Yes. That is another big one. People will come and they'll say, "I need a proofreader." Now, within the editing world, copy editing and proofreading are related, but they're not exactly the same thing.
they're like
Proof
eyebrows. They're not twins.
They're sisters. Yes, they are. Yes. So the proofreading is the very final stage. So proofreading is once all the developmental edits, line edits, copy edits have been accepted. There's still going to be issues. And even after this last
And
stage,
isn't that
there
in
are still
formatting?
issues. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
isn't that like so like you've now formatted your book. And so
yeah.
now we're looking at it on the page size and everything of the book, not in a Google Doc per se. It's like isn't am I correct?
Yeah. Yes. So
Okay.
you can go both ways. I would definitely suggest
That
that this is
information
once it's
came
in a
from
proof.
a copy edit friend of mine who
Yes.
was explaining this to me. She no, proofreader. She's a proofreader as her like main form of editing that she does. So yeah, that's where
Yes.
that came from.
So you can do your own mini proofread before you get it to like that final product stage because you're going to want to go back through on your own after you accept all the copy edits and reread it just to make sure something funky didn't happen when you accepted a change. So, like, let's say a word was supposed to be a lowercase, but you had an uppercase. You want to make sure after you accept that, that maybe that didn't do something weird and there should have been like a period or something funky happened. I always say reread after you accept all of your copy edits, just to make sure everything reads good. And I would read it out loud or have the computer read it out loud to you because you can hear a lot of times kind of weird stuff better out loud than reading it on the page. And then the proofreading stage, like you said, Nino, that is when it is all done and it is ready to go out to the world. So you could give them a PDF. And that's probably that's probably what most of them would prefer is if you give them a PDF. And the PDF will be laid out exactly in the format of how you were going to upload it. So it'll be to the page size, pages are numbered, everything like that. So the proofreader is going to go, they're going to double check that, the page numbers are correct. And your copy editor will do this too. So I did forget to mention something with your copy editor. They're going to do something really cool for you and they're going to make you a style sheet, a house guide of your book. And so they're going to have in there like your character names. They may put your character descriptions, the locations, things like that. They're going to put, how you like to write, how you like to indent stuff, if you do italics, like all these things. They're going to give you this awesome style sheet that you'll have about how you write your book and be able to use that as well to look for cohesiveness of did you all of a sudden have your character had purple hair in like act one and then act two they have like gray hair or they're a blonde, like what the hell happened? So like they'll help you look for those continuity issues as well during your line editing and your copy editing stage. But the copy editor will give you this really cool style sheet. So then your proofreading, like I said, that's the final polish. So they're looking for, maybe when you accepted some of those copy edit changes, it did something funny. Or maybe when you put it in the layout of the book, maybe there was some kind of an error as it was converted from like this Word document to the typesetting in the book. And maybe there's some extra spaces between line breaks or maybe page numbers got shifted weird. So they're going to look for all of these little types of things that are wrong, and they'll make notes on there on that PDF for you. So then you can go back in, you can make those corrections, and it will be glorious and beautiful. So that is the last stage of editing. And then there are 3 other types of editing that you may want to consider depending on what you're writing. So the first one is something that we talked about with a guest previously, and that is having a sensitivity reader. And your book may or may not need this. It depends on the content of your book, the characters of your book. So say that, you're writing a book and you have characters that are different ethnicity than you. Maybe you're going to want to have a reader from that group take a look and, let you know, did I accurately portray your culture? Like things like that. Did I do something wrong? Please let me know. Or maybe you wrote about a person who has some kind of a health issue. And you want to make sure as well that you accurately represented them, like that you didn't play into stereotypes or write something that's going to make them uncomfortable or things like that. Having a sensitivity reader go through and give you that type of feedback is absolutely amazing. And you definitely need to check out the episode from season 1 that we did.
Yes,
And we
with
will link
Denise
that.
Madre. It's
Hmm.
like episode season 1, episode like 3 or
Yeah, it
5.
was
She
early
came out
on.
early, and I think she's gonna be coming back for season 2. I was just chatting with her. So yeah, check that out. She has some really, really amazing information, and I think it's really, really important to consider sensitivity reading, especially when you're writing so far outside of your own thing. For example, if you're a cishet man and you're writing about a woman being a major main character, or a sapphic romance or something along those lines, because it is so far outside of your reality that it's hard to do that accurately and not fall into fetishization or like stereotypes and stuff. So, and there are plenty of examples of bad ways of doing that, So, keeping that in mind, if you're writing a queer character, that you're not just making them, not making this guy just like the designated fun gay guy that hypes up the straight woman, like it's important, especially at this, I feel like in this day and age of writing, that we're not just falling into the same old, that we're trying to be innovative and we're trying to be mindful about what we're writing. So definitely look into a sensitivity reader.
Absolutely. And then another thing that you may not think of for fiction, but definitely for nonfiction, is if I do fact checking. So when you're doing nonfiction, you want to make sure have the things I know Loki. Loki's all about the fact checking. He's like, don't tell lies here. You want to make sure that you have, everything in there that you wrote is correct. So for example, I was helping someone edit a book and they have quotes in there from people. And one of the quotes, I looked at it and I was like, something I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily know that quote, but something just looked off. And so I actually Googled the quote and there was a typo within the quote. So just small things like that are very helpful. And then depending on the type of nonfiction you're writing, there may be, deep fact checking that needs to be done, depending on what you wrote about. However, you may also want fact checking if you're writing fiction. So, like, maybe you're writing a historical fiction and you want to see, okay, like, I want to try to be really accurate to the times. And I just described the person getting dressed. And, a lot of them, they had very elaborate things with like a shift underneath and then like things that have to be tied because they wanted to make clothes be able to fit multiple bodies. And it was cheaper to do that than get one made just to you. So, you may want someone to go through and fact check that and be like, oh, you know what? For the corset here, the bone was actually more flexible than rigid. So, might want to make that change. So that's just kind of something interesting to think about is even within fiction, you may want to do fact checking, or it could be as well, maybe a career, like it doesn't have to be historical. So maybe you are doing a police procedural and you have them doing a certain investigative method. You want to make sure that you're accurately writing that. And yes, we do have liberties within fiction that we're going to change things, right? Like if you watch like the crime shows or things like that, they don't get evidence and stuff back as quick as we do in shows. But if we had to wait for how it is in real life, it would not be interesting because we would have a lot of waiting.
Mhm.
So there are creative liberties, but you do want to see the things where you can be accurate about it. And then you have that wiggle room to play in other places where you need to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're doing a mystery, doing something like thriller, a crime thriller or something like that, having that fact checking could be really beneficial, or even just discussing certain things about your book with somebody who is a professional in
Mhm.
that space, especially nowadays because there are so many true crime girlies, it's ridiculous. Like there's so many of your readers who are going to really be invested in that story also like true crime, and they understand how certain things work now, so it's not like an Agatha Christie's time where people, you only those within the industry could identify, oh yeah, that's not how that would work, kind of thing. Like there are people who understand how blood splatter works just because of their obsession with true crime and such, so keep that in mind.
Yes, and it depends on the genre you're writing too, right? Like if you're doing a police procedural, you want to be more accurate. If you're writing a cozy mystery, it's not about the crime techniques, and so then you don't really have to worry about it. So again, just think about the specifics of your genre. What are the expectations of the readers? Do they really care about that accuracy? Or are they like, oh, whatever, like you can make, they can use the fingerprint dust and get it all over, even if that's not really what happens, because it's a cozy and we're just using that as a comedic moment. So that's kind of just a fun way to look at it. And then a talk would not be complete without mentioning beta readers.
Yes.
So, yes, beta readers, they can be awesome or it can be troublesome. So, your
Yes.
beta, yeah, I think we'll do like probably a whole episode about beta readers. I would love to get someone to
I
come on who does
think
beta
that would be
reading.
I think that would be a great idea. Actually, we might be able to talk to Denise about it because Denise also
Yes.
does beta reading. She does sensitivity reading, editing, and beta reading. So she might be a
Awesome.
great person to chat with it. But
Heck
yeah,
yeah. If you're
because
listening, Denise, come talk
we're
beta reading.
we miss you. Yeah, with the beta reading, we've known people who wrote this amazing, sci-fi fantasy novel and then sent it off to people who don't read anything but nonfiction, and they got all this harsh criticism from it, and that can be very discouraging. Or you can have it like you have your core. So TJ Klune has some beta readers that are his core beta readers. They are who read all of his work. And so he's got his people who understand how he crafts things and stuff, and he shouts them out at the end of his books because they're so integral to his creative process and stuff. So beta readers are so vital, especially when it's just like you've read through your book so many times. You've had professionals look at your book, but you really want some audience perspective. Like, am I really aligning this character right for the reader? You need a reader for that. Because when we look at
Yes.
things as professionals, we're looking at it from this very detailed lens, from a space of knowing about these things, right? You know about the editing, you can identify those things, you can very logical and stuff. But readers do not follow the logic. They're following the emotion of the story a lot of times. And so you need to have that reader who's going to be able to read this book and be like, this felt like it came out of left field. And even if you logically had all of these things, if it feels off to them, that's important information. Because a good beta reader is basically what helps you to get onto that New York Times bestsellers list because it resonates with the person you're writing it for, your reader. That makes
Yes, because what's the point of writing if it's not going to be read? So we want the reader and your target audience reader, that is the most important thing, to be the one beta reading for you. And I think it's very important when you think about a beta reader that you're having them beta read the book earlier in the stage. You want them to be beta reading in that phase one that we were talking about, where we're doing the big picture stuff, because you don't want to get through, even if you're self editing. I'm done with developmental editing. I did my line editing. I did my copy editing. It's all done. I'm going to send it to my beta readers now. And then beta readers come back and you're like, this does not make any sense. Like, this, I don't understand. Because then you're going back and you're rewriting major sections and then rewriting everything after that. So you really want to tackle the beta readers earlier in the process to get them and then save the people who are reading it down the road. That's more part of your promotional marketing thing of, your early readers, your review readers, and they can be the same people who are your beta readers, but you want to get their beta feedback early in the process. So then, you can have them read then the completed version and, they'll be able to give you some great insight of, oh my God, this makes so much more sense. Like I felt so much more connected to this character now that you did this or that. So that's a great way to do it. And you can build, I think they call them like your street teams. I've heard a lot of authors call them where you have like your core group who just love all of your books. Give them your books for free. That is marketing. They will be your most loyal fans and they will tell everybody and their sister to read your books because they're like, this is amazing. They're going to promote your books for you. So don't be afraid to give your books to those core readers because you're going to get so much more value out of it than the couple dollars you would have got from like those 4 or 5 people buying the book. And I think there's a couple things too to think about when you have your beta readers is you want to be very clear about the type of feedback you want because you want, rightly we're talking about, you want feedback that's helpful to you and just saying, I didn't like this part. That's not helpful. Why didn't you like that? So you can make up
Hmm.
a sheet to go with it and be like, please answer these questions when you're reading the book and have the things that matter to you. And then you could have like then just an open section at the end of add whatever thoughts or notes that you want here. But make sure you have a list of actual questions that you want them to answer. Make sure they're readers of your genre and don't get too many chefs in the kitchen. You don't want to have like 10 people beta reading and have to dig through all of these people's feedback. Just a small handful of beta readers is fine. If you only find one person, then do one person. But I would say you probably don't want more than maybe like 5 beta readers to kind of go through that.
EJ Clone uses
Yeah.
3, which is
Yeah.
my favorite
I
number,
think
so
that's a
that's what
sweet
I
spot.
intend to use. Yeah, that's what
Mhm.
I intend to do because 3 is
Yeah.
good. I did have a question, which I think will be something that a lot of listeners will want to know. So I think it should be pretty clear that if you're going the self publishing route, that you're going to want to go through all of these phases, hire your editors and stuff for all of these phases before you officially release it. But if you're planning on going on a traditional route, where on this journey should they go before they start going after literary agents?
Yes. Yes. Excellent point. If you're doing this yourself, you want to go through it all because you're the only one that's doing the editing. You are putting that book out there and you want to put a book out there that is just as fabulous and wonderful as a book that Simon and Schuster is publishing because you know what? You can do that. So, but if you are going to go the traditional route, you want to make sure that you've gone through our phase 1 first and you've done all of that developmental editing before you start querying because you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And a lot of times they only read a handful of pages. And if they see like glaring errors, they're not going to be happy. So at least bare minimum, you do your phase 1. Ideally, you would do a little bit of phase 2. Maybe not necessarily the whole manuscript, but at least to begin with the part that's going to be the sample that they're going to read. You want that first bit of that book to be the most glorious, beautiful thing they could ever see. So you want to have a little bit of the line edits done. You want to have a little bit of the copy editing done just to make it readable, especially if this is your first book. If you send them a manuscript and they're reading through the sample and it has a crap ton of, grammar errors, spelling errors, clunky wording, then they're gonna be like, all right, if I've already seen all of this work that needs to be done and I'm on page 3, this
Mhm.
author is more work than it's worth. But once you're picked up, they are going to take you with their editors through all of those phases. So your book is going to get that whole touch anyway because they're going to do it within their style with their editors. So your editing is not done. Even your development editing is not done, even if
Yeah.
you have personally finished it before you send it to the publisher. But I would say get as much of the editing done as you can on your own before you send it. But bare minimum, you need to do phase 1 and at least a light polish to get rid of any glaring in your face smacked errors
And
with
I
your
think
grammar.
it's important to mention too that whenever you're pitching literary agents, usually they're not asking you for your entire book.
Mhm.
Usually they're asking you for a section. Send me your first few chapters. Or I've heard that some will say like give me something from the middle of your book. And things like that. And just like give me something and it's just a piece. So it's just like I just need 10,000 words from the middle of your book or something along those lines. So before you send anything to an agent, look at what their parameters are, and we'll cover all of this more in our publishing episodes this season. But, look at what their parameters are, find out what they are looking for, then make that like publish ready. And then they're going to ask for more. If they're really into it, they might ask for more. They might want to read the whole thing before they go and pick you up officially and then start being your magical agent. So I think that's it. That's important though, because a lot of people want to go towards the traditional route and they're like, do I have to go through all the way to proofreading before I send it off? Or do I, because they go through a lot of editing. So it's like, what money should I be spending on my editor? So bare minimum, get through the developmental edits, and then whenever you are looking at who you're sending, who you're querying, find and like fine tune that you're sending.
Exactly. And I'll say if they ask for something from the middle, because this is what I ask for when I do a sample edit, there is rationale behind that. They know you've spent more time in the beginning of your book than you have anywhere else in your book. So if they want to see something that's not necessarily that first beginning of the book, that middle section is a better point for them to gauge what your whole book is like. So that is why I always ask for that when I'm doing a sample edit, because I know you've gone over that with a fine tooth comb, so it's not an accurate representation of those beginning chapters of the overall state of your book. So yeah, definitely. You want to have that whole book beautiful because if they ask for that full manuscript, you need to have a cohesive story. Other stuff can be fixed and tweaked. They're not expecting you to have perfect grammar with everything, but they don't want plot holes in your story because that's going to be a lot of time and effort on their end.
It is amazing sometimes though, whenever you get these books that are traditionally published by major publishers and have gone through all the things and you're like, there's a serious plot hole here and no one picked it up. Or it's just like this is a complete character flaw. Like what, did they cut out an entire part of this book? Like how did this character even get here emotionally or mentally or whatever? I just read a book like that. I'm just like, wow. So it's it's a good it's a good reminder that's just like we need a team for our art. We cannot
Yes.
we cannot always do it all ourselves. If you happen to be one of those people who has just an amazing eye for things and you're able to pick out all the grammar things, all the editing things, the line editing things, and also craft an amazing book, then that's really awesome. But for the most part, most of us need a team to work with us in order to make our magic happen. So
We do.
yeah.
I think as a final note to wrap us up is to be aware of timelines. So when you go into editing, I don't want you to be surprised at how long it's going to take. The editor that you want to work with, they may have a wait list because typically for the developmental editing stage, that is like so intense. It could be 40 to 60 plus hours of actual work time for a developmental editor to work through your book. And that's also why it's so expensive. Depending on the length of your book, complexity, different things like that. I mean, that's a lot of hours for someone to put into your book. So you might have, after whatever wait you have to get to your editor, typically developmental editing is probably an 8-week process. Depending on that, if your book is longer, it may take longer. So just be aware of that. The different phases of editing take different amounts of time, but that developmental editing is the longest. I don't know if you hear Loki. He is talking to the birds. If
Like
you hear a weird
in the
noise,
background.
it's so funny. But yeah, just, keep that in mind. And after you get those edits back, that 8 weeks, you then have to implement those edits. So it's
Right.
not a quick process. You're in it for the
Yeah.
long haul. You didn't write it overnight. You're not going to edit it overnight either.
And if, dear listener, you're listening and you're like, well, who is silly enough to think that they can get a whole edit in this little tiny amount of time? It's Rachel's got stories of people saying, I need my entire book edited. My publisher needs it next week. Like that legitimately happens where people are looking for editors and
Many
they're like,
times.
and I need it in a blink of an eye. And you're like, I not only have to read your whole book and edit your whole book, but then you have to go through and make the edits happen. So what planet are you living on? What drugs are you on? Like it's crazy.
Yeah, it is shocking how many times I've had that happen to me, and I'm like, "Okay," and also I have other clients, right? Like, you're not my sole
Yeah.
person that I'm working on, but even if you were, there's no way that we could feasibly do that.
Yeah, like it's like if I'm going to not sleep for several days, I better be getting triple the money for this. And then they're like, "Why is this so expensive?" Bro, you want it in a week. So, yes. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope that you gleaned some knowledge, got some good tips and a little perspective on the editing process. I know that it's always helpful for me to talk to Rachel about the editing process because in fiction it's so different and I wasn't expecting that when I went into fiction personally. I wasn't expecting it to be so different. So, stay tuned. We've got some episodes coming up on the publishing industry and scams to watch out for, different pieces of information and such, and some really awesome guests coming your way. And also, if you're looking for a community that's going to help you with things that has workshops, the link to the Storyweavers community will be linked down below, where you can have 30 days free to try us out and see if you like us. Rachel's going to be doing a workshop in there actually soon. Probably might have already happened by the time you listen to this episode. But there we go. Like, subscribe, do all the things, download, comment. It helps the podcast. So we're just going to mention that now.